The case for today takes place in Norfolk, UK. East Harling is a little hamlet in Norfolk that has a lot to offer. There is a great feeling of community there, and many individuals are quite hospitable. East Harling is a really dreamy area to live because of this, as well as the stunning surroundings and tranquil pace of life. The Heath, a forest area on the outskirts of the hamlet, is a favorite location to go for a stroll with the dog or to stretch your legs. With a cold, crisp wind and just the sounds of nature, it's a place you could stay all day. Peter Wrighton, 83, was one of the residents who resided a few miles from East Harling and was always on the heath with his dogs. Peter loved his two dogs, Dylan and Gemma, and lived with his wife Anne for 59 years. He was undoubtedly enjoying the leisure and independence of retirement after a 35-year career with BT, but he wasn't slowing down. As passionate animal lovers, Peter and Anne often took in and fostered rescue dogs whenever they could. Like so many others, Peter would routinely take his dogs for a stroll on the heath, but one day he failed to show up. This brings us to Saturday, August 5th, 2017, at 10:20 a.m. His wife Anne was obviously quite anxious and rushed out to locate him, but she was unsuccessful. A couple and Nigel Precious were walking their dogs in the woodlands when they noticed something strange. Two unruly dogs approaching them. As they approached, they noticed what they initially believed to be a mannequin next to some brambles, but as they got closer, they saw that it was actually the body of a man who had been partially covered by the brambles. His injuries were extremely violent, and none of his belongings had been taken, so it didn't look like a robbery gone wrong. In a few minutes, this peaceful village would be teeming with police, and the peace would be shattered by the sound of sirens. When Anne arrived at the scene, she was unaware that her beloved husband, Ed, had been murdered. The police took her home to explain the situation, and Peter's body was taken for a post-mortem. It was clear that this was a vicious and frantic murder, as Peter had been stabbed 45 times, many of which were to the back of his neck. He also had a deep slash mark on his neck that devastated his spine. Despite his advanced age of 83, both of his dogs, Gemma and Dylan, remained with his body until they heard the couple approaching. Peter had obviously used every resource at his disposal to defend himself, as seen by the defensive cuts on his hand from attempting to seize the blade from his assailant. Peter's day had begun as usual. He got up at 7:30, greeted his dogs, made them breakfast, and made Anne a cup of tea. He then loaded GMA and Dylan into the car and drove to the heath, stopping along the way to pick up some rolls and cakes as a small gift for his wife. Once there, he started his walk. As the community attempted to come together and process what had happened to this cherished member of their community, flowers were placed on the lawn in honor of Peter, and it was understandable that people in the area were afraid. This was a quiet and secure location where the local news featured feel-good stories about people turning 100 or the opening of a new playground. According to his relatives, he was a really kind guy who never said anything negative about anybody and who always appeared to be liked by others. Others than 220 individuals have already responded to our queries, but Detective Superintendent Andy Smith said that we would continue to pursue all possible leads and are eager to hear from others. They were also eager to calm folks down. Chief Superintendent Mike Fawcett, Norfolk County Policing Commander, stated that since this is a major murder investigation for the constabulary, over 100 officers and staff are currently engaged in the investigation, with support from other forces and partners as well as specialized officers from the National Crime Agency. Additionally, we have been photographing the situation with our drone. I hope this gives local communities the assurance that we are here to help and defend them. I can guarantee local citizens that we will be in the region for the foreseeable future. He had entered the neighborhood store at 9:57 a.m., and his vehicle was seen driving to the heath less than 20 minutes later, according to the police, who were attempting to put together what had transpired that day in the hours before the murder. It was just nonsensical. Who would want to harm Peter, a weak and reticent guy who would never harm anyone? In order to solve the murder of Peter Wrighton, which detectives today have called one of the most brutal they have ever witnessed, but which also requires the assistance of the public, They made another media appeal for information. They knew that if they were to have any chance of solving this case, they would need the public's assistance. On Saturday morning, an 83-year-old was out in the woods close to East Harling walking his dogs. Police are especially requesting that 3 guys who were seen in the neighborhood at the time but have not yet been recognized be tracked down. They may have important details. In the vicinity of Mr. Ron's corpse, the first was seen changing his shirt. He is slender, Caucasian, in his 50s, and has gray hair. The second was likewise white, wearing what have been called heavy-duty flip-flops, a gray or blue t-shirt, and a tanned skin. The third is Caucasian, about 50 and 60, medium in build and dressed in black clothing. It is a crime that has garnered national attention. Last Saturday morning, Peter Wrighton, an 83-year-old dog walker from the adjacent town of Banham, was fatally stabbed. Although it's a challenging inquiry, his family honored him yesterday, calling him a kind, loving husband, father, and grandpa who enjoyed taking his dogs on walks. Being in such a remote area, there is no clear motivation and no CCTV to rely on. Officers have been encouraging the public to inspect gardens and trash cans within 5 miles of the crime site to see whether the murderer left any clothing or a weapon behind in an effort to collect every scrap of evidence from the scene and persuade every potential witness to come forward. Additionally, they have established Operation Graduate, a dedicated phone line for the inquiry. A photo of Peter's vehicle, a red Skoda, and a map of the path he drove that morning, which is shown above in purple, from Kenning Hall to East Harling before arriving at the street in the woods where his corpse was discovered, were also made public by the police this evening. Vicious one of the people they spoke to was a local dog walker named Peter, who had been walking his dog at the time of Peter Wrighton's death. He claimed to have seen a man who didn't look right. He was by himself, didn't have a dog, and wasn't dressed like someone spending a day in the forest, flip-flops, shorts, and a shirt. He had his head down, not looking around, and wasn't trying to make eye contact or talk to anyone. Fortunately, Peter was able to give police a detailed description of the man he had seen, and an EIT was issued of the individual in question, which would finally give them a lead. A psychiatrist explained that they had worked with a 24-year-old man named Alexander Palmer. Although Alexander had never been arrested or convicted before, he had fantasized of attacking total strangers with violence. He had served as a leader in the military before, sometimes with a knife, but in February 2014, he was involved in an event that would profoundly affect him. A fellow trainee had assaulted him, viciously stamping on his head. According to his parents, this would mark the start of a deterioration in his mental health that would ultimately result in his medical release in November 2015. He seemed like a new guy after this. He received many diagnoses from multiple mental health specialists throughout his contacts with various mental health agencies in 2015, both inpatient and outpatient. According to his stepfather, they were speaking to him as if he were a youngster rather than a professional soldier. Concerningly and relevantly, Alexander had a genuine and strong disdain for dog walkers. He would also talk about the voice in his brain that urged him to harm others. He despises dog walkers, according to a specialist who examined him, since they are often whispering negative words about him, including weak and ugly. According to a January 2015 Journal post, he intended to go for dog walkers. The post also said that he would be up with the big ones if he carried out his intended course of action. I detest dog walkers. Everyone would recognize my name and look up to me. I'm almost ready. Read another post. I can't stop the anger and grief that have been rising inside of me for so long. It's becoming difficult. Alexander informed his general practitioner in January 2017 that he was having auditory hallucinations that were motivating him to harm others. He also said that he had bought a hunting knife and a machete. A specialist from the Norol and Suffolk NHS Foundation Trust visited him as a consequence, and the expert wrote to the doctor, "It is in his best interest to get rid of such weapons. Alex is aware of this, comprehends it, and ideally will behave appropriately." According to the expert, the police decided to take him into prison early the next morning because they realized they could not afford to spend any more time. Desperate for any news or update, Peter, the dog walker, had reported seeing the guy in flip-flops out wandering in the vicinity of the murder scene. He discovered that someone had been arrested when he looked at his phone to see if there had been any updates. When Ed and Alexander Palmer arrived at Facebook, he recognized the man's face and realized he had seen him earlier that day. While they awaited the findings, Alexander provided a sample to check for a match in the DNA discovered on Peter Ron's pants. When Alexander was questioned, he clarified that while he had been in the vicinity that day, he had not met Peter and had not spoken with him. He said that he was sad and that he had sobbed and gone for a walk before returning to his vehicle, taking another stroll, and then departing. However, this narrative would soon be completely discredited. The results of the DNA test showed that Alexander was a match. Additionally, Peter's blood was discovered on his jacket collar. A map that had been marked at several locations around the heath would be another piece of evidence discovered in his car. Additionally, CCTV revealed that he had been wearing a light-colored shirt earlier in the day before switching to a black shirt later on. He claimed not to have altered at all. Alexander was now avoiding conversation. He didn't have to, however, since the evidence was speaking for itself. His phone had been confiscated, and a search of it revealed a picture of a knife that the forensic pathologist said could have been used in Peter's murder. No one has ever discovered this knife. Good. His phone also turned up a selfie he had taken soon after Peter was killed. Alexander Palmer was charged with Peter Wrighton's murder since the DNA evidence, the witness's account, and Alexander's account did not fit the evidence. The next step would be to assess Alexander's suitability for trial, which would include a number of tests to see whether he knew right from wrong and if he had intended to carry out this assault. After a number of these assessments, it was decided he was competent to stand trial, and in February 2018 his trial began. He would be interviewed by the court in which he discussed Little Alex, the voice in his brain. His phone records were just as important in putting him there as the DNA evidence. He was in the vicinity from 10:19 to 10:51 a.m., according to his phone, before his vehicle was seen heading north on the A11. This was not the first time he has taken this route. Alexander had traveled down the A11 to the Heath 2 weeks before to Peter's murder, so he was familiar with the region. He possessed a customized license plate for his vehicle, L666AHP. It was also disclosed. Alexander's defense attorney claimed that he was experiencing a mental illness at the time, but he did not testify during the trial. The evidence that he was schizophrenic is abundant. His mental illness seems to have been triggered by an attack on him by a fellow trainee commander in 2014. There was no prior indication of any hostile behavior. During his treatment in 2015, Alexander informed medical personnel. The prosecution told the court, "I will mentally plan out the method, go to the desired location where I wish the scene to be set, and then I will carry out the act of hurting someone." The prosecutor went on to say that it might happen to anybody. His impulse to murder strangers was especially noteworthy. It seems that he has a special aversion to dog walkers. Detective Superintendent Marina Erickson, who had headed the inquiry, was one of the witnesses. She said that Alexander's attitude to Peter's killing was cold-blooded and very calculating. "I believe the first officers on the site accurately classified the situation as an animal assault. Palmer is a violent person who acted in a very animalistic manner." Norfolk Police PC Andrew London was one of the first police on the site. He recounted the enormous pool of blood that around Peter's body and claimed to have never seen anything like his injuries. "He had been attacked by his own dogs, so I thought it was a rather odd injury." When they discovered the pet, Anne Precious, who was out on a walk with her dogs and husband Nigel, told the jury, "I initially thought he had fallen over, and I assumed he was the owner of the dogs." Her husband Nigel recalled, "At first I leaned down and was going to help him get up, but then I saw the injury, and I was pretty sure he was dead. On the other side of the walkway, there was a lot of blood and a big open incision on the neck. At first, I assumed it was a music mannequin, so I believe I was a little shocked. At Nottingham Crown Court, the jury found Alexander Palmer guilty of murder after only 43 minutes of deliberation. He was given a life sentence with a minimum of 28 years in prison. It was also decided that he would not be sent to a psychiatric facility, but rather to a general prison population. According to Mr. Justice Goose, the gravity of your violation was significantly increased. First, because this murder was the result of extensive preparation and premeditation. Second, because he was alone and 83 years old, the victim was especially vulnerable. Third, the level of savage violence you used to kill him was so great that you drove to the scene with a knife and attacked the deceased for no other reason than that he was walking his dogs. At 83 years old and slightly built, he was no match for the violence of your attack. Andrew and Carol, Peter's kids, watched as he was taken away to start his sentence. Despite his lack of emotion, he was spotted mouthing the words, "I love you," to his parents, who were there. A serious case review looking at the involvement of police mental health services and other agencies that Alexander had contact with before the murder was also launched. Another review was launched into the Norol and Sue F. K. Foundation, trust the NSFT, who had looked after Alexander 3 times between April 2014 and March 2017. It found that there were weaknesses in the handling of Alexander's last episode of care. There were issues with understaffing, and his doctor had not been at his discharge meeting. He had been discharged via text. Peter's granddaughter, Meg, said, "I'm sure their resources are stretched, and they don't have enough staff." But when someone is presenting such a serious case, there aren't really any words for it to not have a doctor. It just seemed unfathomable that it had been allowed to happen that way. Someone knew he had said he wanted to kill dog walkers specifically. He had extreme symptoms, and the fact that he was clearly dangerous. That is what shocked us most, how things hadn't been done in reaction to that. Honestly, it seemed like something out of a film like The Zodiac Killer or something. When it was revealed that Alexander's mother and stepfather had informed the NHS Foundation Trust that he was collecting knives, more startling information would surface. They said that he was not taking his prescription drugs. They informed a reporter that he had been known to declare that he would murder Alex when buying knives. According to his mother, he became more reclusive after learning that I knew he had acquired them. We know one thing about what transpired on the Heath that day, but we don't know many other things. Dedicated to helping others and providing much-needed homes for foster dogs, Peter Ron was a kind guy. Although he was aware that his day had begun similarly to others and was eager to get home to Anne with the cakes and other delicacies he had purchased for her, he had unfortunately encountered Alexander Palmer. The thought of this truth is just too heartbreaking. Those who loved Peter and the dogs he was able to give a second opportunity to will carry on his legacy. They also demonstrate his compassionate, caring, and kind nature.